You? At Paris Fashion Week? Jason scoffed, his tone sharp, laced with disbelief and something nastier, mockery. Come on, Mia, you're too simple for that kind of luxury. Mia stood frozen for a second. She hadn't expected applause, but she also hadn't expected that. She had only mentioned it casually, a passing dream, not a demand. They were standing in the middle of the boutique she had been too nervous to enter alone. Mannequins in glass cases wore handcrafted gowns that cost more than her monthly rent. The scent of perfume hung heavy in the air, blending with the tension that had just spiked. I was just saying, it would be amazing to attend someday, as a guest. Not even front row, Mia said softly, trying to explain, trying to laugh it off. But Jason wasn't listening. He had already turned away, scrolling on his phone. Behind the counter, the boutique attendant raised her eyebrows and quickly looked down at the receipt she was printing, pretending not to hear. The other shoppers, two well-dressed women with high cheekbones and silent judgment in their eyes, glanced at Mia, then whispered something behind manicured hands. The moment was small, but it shattered something inside her. Mia didn't cry. Not there, not in front of them. She just smiled faintly, nodded, and quietly excused herself. Jason didn't notice she left. Outside, the New York wind slapped against her coat. She walked toward the subway in silence, her boots clicking against the pavement, heart thudding like a slow, painful drum. It wasn't the first time Jason had said something like that, but it was the first time he had said it without even realizing he was hurting her. Too simple. He always used that word, like it was harmless, like it wasn't a slow, daily erasure of her worth. Mia had met Jason 3 years ago. Back then, he was charming, hungry for success, and, at least she thought, drawn to her calmness. You're different from the other girls, he had said once, running his fingers through her hair. You're real. She believed him. She never told him who she really was. He thought she was just a girl who worked part-time at a bookstore in Brooklyn, wore second-hand sweaters, and drank herbal tea instead of cocktails. And she was all those things. But she was more. Much more. Mia Delacroix Bennett was the only daughter of Celeste Delacroix, the founder of Delacroix Couture, one of the most powerful fashion houses in Europe. The world didn't know because Mia chose to vanish. She walked away from the runways, the legacy, the endless galas and society events. When her mother passed away, the empire transferred to her, but she hid it. She created a new identity, a quiet one, a humble one. She didn't want to be seen as money. She wanted to be loved for who she was. So she let Jason believe she was ordinary, until now. Standing in the wind, her fingers numb from the cold, Mia remembered every humiliating moment Jason had made her feel small. Every dinner party where he introduced her as just a teacher. Every sideways glance when she wore something too plain. Every time he joked, you'd get eaten alive in Paris. Well, let them try. Because Mia was done shrinking to make others comfortable. That night, she went home and opened the safe under her bed. Inside was a black folder, sealed, untouched for 3 years. She broke the seal. Inside were the ownership papers to Delacroix Couture, international patents, bank documents, her late mother's handwritten letter urging her to return when the time was right. The time was now. The next morning, Mia made 2 calls. The first was to Laurent Duval, her mother's closest confidant, now CEO of Delacroix. He answered on the first ring. "Mademoiselle Bennett," he said in his deep French accent, voice trembling. "Is it time?" "Yes," she replied. "Call the board. I'm coming to Paris." The second call? To a private number in London. A man named Luca Moretti, billionaire, fashion investor, tech mogul, and her mother's former protege. "I need your help," she said. "I want to take it all back." 3 days later, a jet waited for her at JFK. The fashion world didn't know what was coming, but it would. Because the girl Jason called too simple for luxury was about to redefine what power looked like. And she wouldn't arrive quietly. She would arrive on the arm of a billionaire. She would arrive in couture. She would arrive with cameras flashing. Jason would see her again. But this time, he'd be the one looking up. From the outside, Mia Bennett looked like the kind of girl you passed on the street and forgot a minute later. She worked at a quiet used bookstore on the corner of Flatbush and 7th Avenue in Brooklyn, wore the same scuffed Converse every day, ordered chamomile tea, always. She clipped coupons, baked muffins for the neighborhood kids, and sent handwritten thank you cards for the smallest of favors. To the world, she was simple. And that's exactly how Mia wanted it. She shared a tiny, rent-controlled apartment with an old tabby cat named Hugo. The floors creaked, the heat only worked when it wanted to. Her furniture was mostly salvaged from sidewalk giveaways, and her wardrobe hadn't seen a runway trend in years. But it was hers. It was peaceful. And it was far, far away from the life she used to know. Because Mia Bennett wasn't really Mia Bennett. She was Mia Delacroix. Yes, that Delacroix. The only daughter of Celeste Delacroix, fashion icon, designer genius, and the founder of Delacroix Couture, a name whispered with reverence across Europe. Her mother's gowns had graced royalty, Oscar winners, and international royalty alike. She had built an empire from a single sewing machine in a Marseille apartment. And Mia was born into that world of elegance and excess, but she hated every inch of it. Even as a child, the lights gave her headaches. The cameras followed her to school. Every birthday was an event, every friendship a photo op, every mistake a headline. While her classmates rode bikes and scraped knees, Mia practiced posture and signed NDAs. Her mother meant well. She loved Mia fiercely, but the pressure was suffocating. Then everything changed. When Mia was 19, Celeste died in a sudden car crash on a rainy night in Milan. The entire world mourned the fashion queen. The news cycle devoured every detail: who was driving, where they were going, what song was playing in the car. But no one asked about the girl left behind. At 19, Mia became the sole heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire. Designers bowed to her. Lawyers lined up to guide her. Every magazine wanted the orphan heiress cover. Instead, she vanished. She didn't fake her death. She just disappeared. She left Europe, changed her last name, and used her inheritance to quietly fund a series of trusts, all protected by one man, Laurent Duval, her mother's oldest friend and CEO of Delacroix. He understood. He didn't try to stop her. "I want to live like a real person," she told him. And she did. For nearly a decade, Mia created a new identity in America. She enrolled in a small college in Illinois, studied literature, and lived like the girl she was never allowed to be. No bodyguards, no couture, no curated life. She met Jason in her final year. At first, he seemed different. He worked in tech, not fashion, and didn't recognize her last name. They met at a coffee shop during finals week. He spilled his drink on her notes, apologized profusely, and insisted on buying her a new journal. They ended up talking for hours. He was bold, ambitious, full of ideas. She was quiet, grounded, fascinated by his fire. They fell in love fast, and for a while she believed he loved her for her. She never told him who she was, never let him see the real bank statements. He thought she lived paycheck to paycheck, and she let him. She thought if he loved her in simplicity, it meant something more. But cracks formed quickly. He began pointing out her lack of ambition. Said she wasn't driven enough. He made small comments at dinner about how she dressed too modestly. When they walked past designer stores, he joked that she couldn't survive in the big leagues. Still, she stayed, because Mia wanted so badly for someone to love her without the Delacroix name, without the fortune, without the spotlight. But Jason didn't love her for her simplicity. He tolerated it, and eventually he resented it. Every time he rolled his eyes at her bookstore job, every time he joked about her tea collection, every time he said, "You're not like those women at the galas," what he meant was, "You're not enough." But he didn't know. He didn't know the truth. That Mia had access to more wealth than he could imagine. That she had walked away from a fortune because she craved peace. That she was, in fact, the very woman he dreamed of impressing, just in disguise. And while he chased investors and name-dropped luxury brands, Mia had the power to buy every company in his contact list. She had stayed quiet out of love. But now, love had twisted into humiliation. And Mia Bennett, the girl who once ran from fashion, was about to return as Mia Delacroix. Not to prove a point, but to take back everything that was always hers. This time, she wouldn't hide behind bookshelves and bargain bins. She wouldn't downplay her worth to soothe a man's ego. She wouldn't apologize for the name that carried weight in every fashion capital on earth. The transformation wouldn't begin with a makeover. It would begin with a plane ticket. To Paris. And a message to the world: you can call her simple all you want. But when Mia Delacroix decides to rise, she rises in couture. Paris in the spring was more than just beautiful. It was alive. The city buzzed with energy, a kind of effortless glamour that pulsed through the cobbled streets, across the bridges of the Seine, and into the golden halls of its historic buildings. And during Fashion Week, Paris didn't just glow, it exploded. Every hotel lobby shimmered with diamond earrings and flashbulbs. Every cafe had at least one editor nursing espresso while typing fierce critiques between cigarette drags. Cars with tinted windows glided through narrow streets. Security stood in front of gilded double doors, nodding only for the most powerful names in the industry. Mia stepped off the jet and into that world as if she had never left it. Though it had been years since she walked the steps of Palais Garnier or dined at L'Avenue with designers, her return wasn't timid. It was strategic. Laurent Duval had arranged everything. The suite at Hôtel Le Cygne, a fleet of black vehicles, a reactivated security team, and a personal assistant named Camille who knew every secret hallway and service entrance in the city. But the crown jewel of her return? The gala. The Delacroix Revival Gala wasn't just another event in Fashion Week. It was the event. For the first time in over a decade, the brand would showcase a new line inspired by Celeste Delacroix's original sketches, ones Mia had discovered hidden in her mother's journals after her death. A celebration of legacy. A relaunch. A coronation. The venue was the Palais de Tokyo, one of the most breathtaking and provocative art spaces in Europe. Towering ceilings, dramatic lighting, and endless white walls made it the perfect canvas for rebirth. The day before the gala, Mia toured the space with Sophia Martel, the house's creative director and longtime protégé of her mother. "You've grown into her eyes," Sophia said softly, adjusting a spotlight angle. "That same fire." Mia smiled, but it was guarded. She didn't feel like Celeste yet. Not fully. But she was close. Outside, a crowd had already begun gathering near the velvet ropes, hoping to spot celebrities during rehearsals. Even whispers of Mia's return had leaked. Rumors moved faster in Paris than limousines. "I heard she's bringing someone powerful." Someone from tech? No, royalty. They weren't entirely wrong, because walking next to Mia through the rows of rehearsal chairs, clipboard in hand, was Luca Moretti. Founder of Moretti Tech, Billionaire, reclusive, rumored to have once dated a royal ballet dancer. He rarely showed his face in public unless it was behind a keynote screen or next to a UN ambassador. And now, he was with Mia. He wasn't just funding the revival, he was part of her return, her anchor. "I never thought I'd walk into this world again," Mia whispered as they stepped onto the empty runway. "You were never out of it," Luca replied. "You just gave it time to miss you." The day of the gala arrived like thunder. By noon, photographers had set up barricades, drones hovered, news anchors rehearsed lines outside the palais. Inside, models rehearsed one last time in couture gowns that had taken over 400 hours each to stitch. Champagne chilled in crystal. Every chair had a name printed in gold foil. Editors, buyers, royals, CEOs. Back at the hotel, Mia sat in front of the mirror, a team of stylists moving like surgeons around her. The gown she would wear wasn't off a rack. It was a one-of-one creation, a tribute to her mother. Silk, the color of moonlight, shaped to her body like second skin. The neckline was structured but feminine, dipped low enough to command attention, high enough to maintain elegance. The train was embroidered with her mother's initials, hidden just beneath the folds. Camille fastened a diamond cuff around Mia's wrist. "You're going to make every woman in this city stand taller tonight," she whispered. The car ride to the venue was silent, not because Mia was nervous, but because she was focused. When the doors opened, she stepped onto the black carpet, not red, not white, but black. It was a bold statement. Delacroix was back, and it didn't need to follow anyone's rules. The flashes started instantly. "Mia, look here! Mia Delacroix returns. Who's the man beside you?" She paused with Luca on the carpet. Her hand rested on his arm. She smiled softly, but not shyly. It was the kind of smile that said, "I know exactly who I am." Inside, the crowd turned. Whispers grew louder. Some people stood instinctively. Fashion editors elbowed each other. Phones snapped silently. Mia walked down the aisle of the main hall as if it were a royal corridor. Her heels clicked against marble. Her gown swept behind her. Luca stayed a half step behind, not because he had to, but because he knew this moment wasn't his. It was hers. She reached the front row and sat in the center seat. As the lights dimmed, a voice echoed through the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Delacroix Couture proudly presents The Return, inspired by the legacy of Celeste, designed by Sophia Martel, revived by Mia Delacroix. And just like that, the music rose. Models floated down the runway in designs that merged past and future, lace collars paired with AI fabric blends, flowing trains sculpted into modern shapes. The crowd didn't clap, they gasped. By the finale, the entire room stood. Cameras turned to Mia again, and for the first time, she didn't flinch. She met every lens, every gaze, every whisper with stillness. She had returned not as the lost daughter of fashion, she had returned as its next queen. Jason Carter had always believed he was destined for more. More money, more power, more attention. Born in suburban Jersey to a middle-class family, he was the kind of man who hated average. He despised routine, cringed at modesty, and believed ambition was the only religion worth practicing. In college, he wasn't the smartest or the most talented, but he was relentless. He learned to network before he learned to code. Smiled at professors the way actors smiled at casting directors. By the time he moved to New York City, he had perfected the art of looking successful, even when his bank account said otherwise. That was the Jason Mia first met. And the man she fell for wasn't entirely a lie. In the beginning, Jason had been charming. He called her refreshing, said she was real, praised her for not being like the Instagram clones he met at work. He brought her flowers once a week, remembered her favorite tea, and joked about how they'd someday write a book called How to Build an Empire with Only 2 Spoons and a Dream. Mia had laughed. She thought he saw her. But Jason didn't fall in love with Mia. He fell in love with the idea of being admired for loving someone simple. It made him feel evolved, deep, better than the guys chasing models and influencers. He bragged to friends, "She's not flashy, she's wholesome, like real wholesome." But that admiration slowly warped into disdain. As Jason's startup began gaining attention, after a few lucky breaks, some borrowed code and a $500,000 investment from a friend's father, he stopped coming home at a decent hour, stopped bringing flowers, started commenting on the way Mia dressed. "Couldn't you just wear something sharper?" he'd ask, frowning at her cardigan. "We're going to a party with actual investors." She'd try to understand. She bought a few new blouses. He barely noticed. He changed his social media bios to tech innovator disrupting the future. Started tagging himself in places he never used to visit, rooftop lounges, exclusive poker nights, private clubs, and then came Chelsea. She entered the picture like a perfume cloud, loud, glittering, fast-talking. 23 years old, with a background in fitness, influencing, and just enough fame to get free drinks at luxury hotels. Jason met her at a brand launch for a wearable health-tracking necklace. Mia had declined the invitation. She had a shift at the bookstore. Chelsea didn't know who Mia was, didn't care. To her, Jason was the next big thing. A potential cash-out, a ticket to relevance. And to Jason, Chelsea was shiny, impressive, new. He didn't end things with Mia, not yet. That would require confrontation, guilt, ownership. Instead, he started fading. Shorter texts, less affection, more nights out. Mia noticed. She always noticed. But she didn't want to believe the man she gave 3 years to could discard her so easily. Until that day in the boutique. She had wandered inside after spotting a dress in the window, a simple cream number with delicate hand embroidery. The kind of thing that reminded her of her mother's early work. She ran her fingers over the fabric with reverence. Jason, annoyed, had followed her in after taking a call on the sidewalk. "You? At Paris Fashion Week?" He had laughed when she mentioned it, not realizing she wasn't joking. "Come on, Mia, you're too simple for that kind of luxury." The words hung in the air like poison. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Casual, careless. As if the idea was laughable, as if she were laughable. The boutique attendant had frozen. One of the women browsing had looked up with raised eyebrows. Mia felt her cheeks burn. She said nothing. And Jason didn't notice. He was already back on his phone. That moment snapped something inside her. Later that evening, Jason sat at a rooftop lounge in the meatpacking district with Chelsea on his lap, sipping a $26 cocktail and talking about his future. "I've been thinking," he told her, "maybe we do a trip to Europe. Hit Milan, London, Paris." "Ooh, Fashion Week," Chelsea beamed. "I could totally kill it there. I've got this stylist, she's friends with a buyer at Louis Vuitton. Jason grinned. Yeah, and I'm kinda connected now. He wasn't. Not really. But he believed if he talked enough, dressed well enough, and picked the right plus one, he could fake it till he made it. People love us, he added, taking a selfie with her. You're like a step up. Chelsea giggled, not realizing what he meant. Or maybe she did. Mia didn't confront Jason. She didn't scream, didn't beg. She simply left. And by the time Jason noticed she hadn't texted in days, she was already on a private jet to Paris. Back in New York, he barely blinked. Whatever. He told Brandon, his business partner. She was great, but she was never gonna grow with me. You know? She just didn't get the vision. Brandon hesitated. She supported you through everything. Jason shrugged. Yeah, but support's not enough. I need someone who fits. But the universe doesn't ignore arrogance forever. 2 weeks later, Jason was scrolling his phone in bed with Chelsea beside him when a headline made him sit upright. Delacroix heiress returns to Paris Fashion Week after 10-year absence. His eyes widened. There she was, Mia, not in a bookstore, not in a cardigan, but on the arm of Luca Moretti, wrapped in custom couture, flanked by bodyguards, flashing the smile of someone who didn't just survive betrayal. She turned it into a runway. Jason stared, stunned. Chelsea leaned over. Who's that? Jason didn't answer. Because in that moment, everything he thought he knew collapsed. He hadn't dated a simple girl. He had dated a queen, and he'd thrown her away. The rooftop of the Gramercy Club shimmered under golden string lights, casting a warm glow on the elite of Manhattan's tech scene. Waiters in black suits carried trays of caviar and champagne. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. The scent of truffle oil, expensive cologne, and clout filled the air. This wasn't just a party, it was a showcase. A battlefield. A place where startups were born or buried based on handshakes and Instagram stories. And Jason Carter? He was in his element. Mia stood at the edge of the crowd holding a glass of water. She never drank at Jason's events. She wore a dress she had spent weeks picking out. Soft blue, modest, elegant. Not designer, but tailored just enough to flatter her figure. Her hair was pinned back simply. Her heels were low and practical. She didn't sparkle, didn't demand attention. But she was proud of how she looked. She had come to support Jason, to celebrate his latest milestone, a feature in a startup magazine and whispers of a Series A investment. He told her it was going to be low-key, that she didn't need to dress up. Just be you, he had said. So she had. But the second they arrived, Mia felt it. Jason changed. He greeted everyone with a different tone, louder, slicker, more polished. He was suddenly Jay, not Jason. When he introduced her, it was rushed. This is Mia, he mumbled once before pivoting to pitch his AI scheduling software to an investor in a velvet blazer. She stood beside him like furniture. He drifted away in minutes, swallowed by the crowd. Mia walked to the bar alone, her glass now empty. She leaned against the railing, staring at the city lights. She told herself not to take it personally. This was his world, his moment. Maybe he just needed space to shine. But then she heard it. Who's that? A woman asked nearby, sipping a neon-colored drink. Jason's voice responded, loudly, carelessly, too close. Oh, that's Mia, he said with a chuckle that sliced like glass. She's not into this kind of stuff. She's more, you know, simple. The girls around him giggled. She looks sweet, one offered. She's sweet, Jason replied, shrugging. She just doesn't really fit into the luxury scene. Doesn't care about labels. I told her it's fine, but yeah, tonight's crowd's a little intense for her. More laughter. She your assistant? Another joked. Jason laughed too. Mia froze. She didn't need to hear more. She turned and slipped away from the bar, weaving through the crowd, barely noticing the smiles or champagne spills. She walked down the back stairs, her heels clicking against cold concrete. She didn't stop until she reached the alley behind the building. There, beneath a flickering light, she finally let herself feel it. The sting, the humiliation, the betrayal. She wasn't angry because he called her simple. She was angry because she believed him when he used to say it was a compliment. Because for 3 years, she had given everything to this man, supported him, cooked for him, believed in him when no one else did, sacrificed her identity to protect his ego. And here he was, laughing at her in front of strangers, like she was some old hoodie he was too embarrassed to wear in public. She felt stupid, but more than that, she felt done. For a while she stood in that alley, the city humming beyond her. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled, but not from sadness, from clarity. She dialed the number she had saved under LD. It rang once. "Mademoiselle?" A French voice answered. "I'm ready," she said, her voice low, steady. There was silence on the other end. "Then I'll notify the board. We begin tomorrow." She hung up. Back upstairs, Jason was laughing louder than ever. Chelsea had shown up uninvited, wrapped in a dress she couldn't afford, and Jason didn't send her away. Instead, he poured her a drink and introduced her to his new VC contact. He didn't even notice Mia had left. 2 hours later, she sent him a message. "I won't be home tonight, or tomorrow, or after that." He read it hours later, half drunk, and didn't even respond. He assumed it was temporary, that she'd come crawling back. She didn't. The next morning, Mia packed her things, left the apartment keys on the counter, booked a one-way flight to Paris. The only thing she took from the life they shared, a single photo of herself smiling, before she ever met Jason, before she ever let anyone convince her that she had to shrink to be loved. She took that photo and pinned it inside her journal. Then she stepped onto the plane. Because this wasn't heartbreak. This was awakening. And Jason Carter? He had just lost the one woman who could have made him feel like a king. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. It had always been a little sanctuary, a safe, humble place where Mia could breathe without the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. But tonight, it felt hollow. Like a shell after something important had crawled out of it and left nothing behind. Mia closed the door gently behind her. Not because she was trying to be quiet, but because she didn't have the energy for sound. She dropped her purse to the floor and stood in the middle of the room, staring at nothing. The same beige couch, the books stacked by the window, her old record player still loaded with a Billie Holiday vinyl she hadn't played in weeks. The small framed photo of her and Jason at the lake, his arm around her, both smiling, back when she believed him. Back when she believed herself. She wanted to scream. Instead, she sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, her coat still on, and stared at the floor. What just happened? It had all felt so sudden, but it hadn't been. Not really. Jason's betrayal wasn't one blow. It was a series of tiny paper cuts that she had ignored until she bled out emotionally. He hadn't just humiliated her at the rooftop party. He had chipped away at her for months, years. And she had let him. That was the part that stunned the most. She curled her legs beneath her and finally let the tears come. Big, angry tears. Not soft sobs, but chest-heaving, breathless crying that made her feel like something inside her was breaking open. Not just from the betrayal, but from the guilt of staying too long. From the fear that maybe she had become small. From the mourning of the version of herself she'd buried to make someone else feel big. She cried until her face was swollen and her throat hurt. She cried until her cat Hugo padded over and sat quietly beside her, as if to say, "It's okay. Let it out." For hours, Mia sat in the dark, remembering everything. The times she made excuses for Jason's dismissiveness. The moments he turned her down for dinner because he had a thing. The dozens of events she skipped because she didn't feel pretty enough, rich enough, glamorous enough to be seen next to him. And most of all, she remembered the girl she used to be before she dimmed her own light. The girl who knew fabrics better than most designers. The girl who once stayed up all night designing her prom dress because she hated everything in stores. The girl who used to stand in her mother's atelier, tracing the seams of couture gowns with reverence, not fear. That girl hadn't died. She had just gone into hiding. And tonight, in the dark, that girl stirred. It didn't happen all at once. The rebirth wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, slow, like a pilot light flickering back to life. Mia reached for her phone. Dozens of unread messages, a few from Jason finally. One said, "Are you okay?" Another, "Come home, let's talk." She deleted them without opening. Then she opened her notes app and began typing. She didn't know what she was writing at first, just thoughts, phrases. "I dimmed my light to make someone else shine. Simple isn't weakness, it's silence, and silence ends now. Paris, revival, my name, not his." By the time she stopped, her hands were trembling, but not from fear. From adrenaline. She walked to the closet. She hadn't opened the box in over 3 years. It was tucked behind her coats, beneath old scarves and forgotten handbags. Dusty. heavy, sealed with tape and memories. Inside were her mother's sketchbooks, vintage Delacroix invitations, handwritten letters, swatches of fabric that never went into production, and beneath all of it, a sealed envelope. She opened it with careful hands. It was her mother's final letter. "Mia, darling, if you're reading this, it means you've spent time away. I hope you used it to grow, to heal, to remember who you are, not just who you were born to be. I always knew you'd need space before you could take up space. But one day, you'll return. Not for me, for you. And when you do, don't walk back in. Command it. Love always." Mamma Mia closed her eyes. She could hear her mother's voice, feel her hands fixing the hem of a gown, smell the scent of jasmine and cedar that lingered in her office. She stood, wiped her face, and walked to her desk. She opened her laptop and sent a single email to Laurent Duval. Subject line, "I'm ready. Message, let's bring it back." Then she opened another tab, booked a one-way flight to Paris. Departure 2 days from now. She didn't bother packing that night. She didn't need to. The most important thing was already with her. Her clarity, her name, her power. The jet was silent as it sliced through the sky toward Paris. The lights were dimmed. Champagne was chilled. Every detail, from the stitched leather seats to the private bedroom in the back, whispered one word: elite. Mia sat by the window, her eyes locked on the horizon. She didn't speak much during the flight. She didn't need to. Everything had already been decided. This wasn't a vacation. It was a return, a reclamation. By the time the wheels touched down at Le Bourget Airport, the sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky in soft gold and lavender. Laurent Duval was waiting at the bottom of the steps, holding his coat tightly against the morning breeze, eyes damp with emotion. "You're really here," he said, stepping forward. Mia smiled, but her voice was steady. "I'm ready now." A black Mercedes whisked her away from the tarmac, through narrow cobblestone alleys, past rows of ornate Parisian balconies. It stopped in front of Hotel Le Cygne, an exclusive boutique property favored by monarchs and movie stars. The entire top floor had already been reserved for her. Laurent made sure of it. But she didn't rest. Instead, she went straight to the Delacroix headquarters. The building hadn't changed much. Marble floors, gold trim, that same giant portrait of her mother in the main lobby, surrounded by whispers of awe from visiting designers and press. For years, Mia had walked away from all of this. Now, she was walking back in, not as the scared girl who fled legacy, but as the woman ready to lead it. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt endless. When the doors opened, a dozen familiar faces looked up from their chairs around a long table. Some gasped, others simply stared. And at the head of the table stood Sophia Martel, head designer, longtime mentor, and the last person to ever see Celeste Delacroix alive. Sophia stepped forward, hands clasped, her voice trembling. "You look so much like her." Mia smiled, eyes sharp. "I'm not her." She paused, then added, "But I carry everything she built in my blood." That afternoon, behind closed doors, Mia laid it all out. Her return wasn't symbolic. She wasn't here to pose for photos or sign some honorary position on the board. She was here to lead, to own, to rebuild. The executives hesitated at first. Some whispered doubts, others exchanged glances. Then Mia unzipped her leather case and pulled out the documents, proof of her majority ownership, legal filings, patent rights, letters from Celeste, and finally, the deal. She wanted to relaunch Delacroix under a new division, Delacroix Revival, a modern, ethical, sustainable luxury line, still couture, still elite, but with a focus on purpose, not just glamour, inspired by her mother's archived sketches and driven by new innovation, and she had the funding to back it. That's when she said his name. "Luca Moretti is coming on board as my partner." The room shifted. Luca Moretti, the reclusive Italian billionaire, tech mogul, founder of Moretti Global, investor in medical AI, green energy, and space exploration. The man Forbes once called the smartest power broker you've never met, and also the man Mia had known since she was 16. Back then, he had interned at Delacroix as a quiet tech consultant, helping Celeste streamline production operations and introduce wearable tech into fashion. He and Mia bonded over long nights in the design lab, him explaining algorithms, her showing him the art of silhouette. They lost touch after her mother died, until now. Luca arrived in Paris the next morning. His black town car pulled into the private Delacroix courtyard, paparazzi completely unaware. He walked in wearing a tailored charcoal suit, no tie, and the air of a man who could crash markets or build cities. When he saw Mia, his entire face softened. "You came back," he said. "And you kept your number," she smiled. They shook hands like old friends, but they spoke like equals. For the next 2 days, they worked side by side, reviewing the legacy archives, touring the flagship atelier, meeting with fabric developers and ethical manufacturers. Every decision Mia made was thoughtful but firm. She wasn't guessing. She knew what she wanted. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of the Hotel La Cine, champagne glasses in hand, Luca turned to her. "Why now?" he asked. She looked at the skyline, lights blinking, the Eiffel Tower glowing in the distance. "Because I got tired of pretending to be less than I am," she said. "I let someone make me feel like I wasn't enough, and I believed him for too long." Luca's eyes didn't leave hers. "He must be an idiot," Mia laughed quietly. "He is." There was a pause. Then he added, "You know, you don't need me. You could do this alone." "I know," Mia said, "but I don't want to." The next morning, the press release went live. Delacroix Revival launches under leadership of Mia Delacroix and Luca Moretti. Fashion royalty meets billionaire tech tycoon in bold industry shakeup. Social media erupted. Who was Mia Delacroix? Where had she been? How did she land Moretti? Speculation turned into admiration. Whispers turned into headlines. Suddenly, she wasn't the quiet girl Jason mocked. She was front-page news. An heiress reborn. A legacy rekindled. A woman no longer hiding. Mia stood in front of the full-length mirror in her Paris suite at Hotel La Cine. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting golden stripes across the marble floor. The air smelled of fresh roses, designer perfume, and something new, something electric. Transformation. This wasn't a makeover born from insecurity. This was war paint. A declaration. Sophia Martel and her team buzzed around the suite like a backstage army, their movements fluid and precise. Fabrics hung on rolling racks, shoes lined the floor in military precision, and a table held rows of accessories worth more than Mia's entire Brooklyn apartment. But it wasn't the price tags that made the difference. It was the intention. "Elegance isn't about shouting," Sophia said, holding up a deep burgundy gown. "It's about presence." Mia smiled, stepping into the dress. "Then I want them to feel me before I speak." Hours earlier, she had woken to a text from Laura. "Anna Wintour has requested a front-row interview, and Luca just confirmed your seat at Dior." The world was watching, and Mia Delacroix was ready to be seen. For the first time in years, she didn't hesitate. She didn't ask for approval. She didn't shrink in the mirror. She stood tall. Power looked good on her. Camille, her assistant, brought over a pair of stilettos, black velvet, 6 inches, delicate silver buckle. "These are the same heels your mother wore at her final show," Camille whispered. Mia slid them on without a word. Her makeup was subtle but sharp. Contoured cheekbones, a rich nude lip, a smoky liner that turned her gaze into a blade. Her hair was pulled into a low twist, revealing the diamond collar necklace she had designed in secret, inspired by her mother's earliest sketches. She was no longer hiding behind softness. She was softness weaponized. As the car pulled up to the venue, cameras exploded before the door even opened. The streets were lined with press. Influencers craned their necks for a glimpse. Fans waved signs. Photographers yelled over each other. But the moment Mia stepped out, everything paused. She didn't pose. She didn't smile. She walked. Deliberate, controlled, radiant. The velvet gown hugged her frame like a secret. The diamond collar glinted with every step. Her eyes scanned the crowd, not with fear, but with ownership. And on her arm, Luca Moretti, calm, sharp, silent. The power couple no one saw coming. They entered the Dior showcase like royalty. Editors stood, publicists whispered, models side-eyed her with admiration and curiosity. Mia sat front row, legs crossed, shoulders back, unbothered by the dozens of cameras pointed in her direction. The show began, but half the room kept their eyes on her. The press that night couldn't stop talking. Mia Delacroix doesn't walk into Fashion Week, she commands it. From unknown to unmissable, Delacroix heiress redefines elegance. Back at the hotel, Mia changed into a second look. This time for the Delacroix Revival Gala, her brand's official re-entry into the industry. The second dress was even bolder. Crimson silk, asymmetrical neckline, exposed shoulder, fitted with a corseted waist and floor-length train. Her heels shimmered with embedded sapphires. Her earrings were antique Delacroix, passed down through 4 generations. As she descended the grand staircase into the gala hall, every head turned. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The whispers were deafening. Jason saw the photos within minutes. He was at a cafe in Soho with Chelsea, nursing a lukewarm latte and scrolling his feed when the images hit page 6. There she was. Not the quiet girl he joked about, not the simple one, but a vision, an heiress, a storm. Chelsea leaned over. "Wait, is that your ex?" Jason's throat tightened. "Yeah, that's Mia Delacroix?" she gasped. "As in, the Delacroix?" He didn't answer. Because what could he say? That he used to call her boring? That he laughed at her dreams? That he thought she'd stay quiet? As Mia walked through the gala, champagne in hand, flanked by international fashion editors and diplomats, she caught the flash of her reflection in a mirrored pillar. She didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. And yet, she knew her. She was the little girl who used to sneak into her mother's studio to sketch her own gowns. The teenager who begged to attend sewing school instead of boarding school. The woman who disappeared for 10 years not because she was weak, but because she was building. And now she was undeniable. Sophia raised her glass from across the room. "To your mother," she mouthed. Mia nodded, eyes glassy. But this wasn't about Celeste anymore. This was about Mia. Not the heiress, not the secret, but the architect of her own rebirth. She was no longer just wearing luxury. She was luxury. The Belvoir Gala was the pinnacle of Paris Fashion Week, a dazzling, ultra-exclusive event hosted at a 19th-century palace just outside the city. Only the most influential names were invited: CEOs, fashion editors, royalty, and billionaires. It was a place where deals were made with handshakes, where trends were whispered into existence. This year, it would be remembered for something else entirely: the revenge of Mia Delacroix. She arrived in a custom Delacroix revival gown, black velvet with crystal embellishments shaped like shattered glass, a metaphor only she fully understood. Her heels sparkled with diamonds. Her lips were deep red, a perfect contrast to her calm, powerful presence. And on her arm, as always, was Luca Moretti. As they stepped onto the grand marble staircase leading into the palace, photographers swarmed like bees. Flashbulbs lit up the night. Everyone wanted a piece of the woman whose name had once been forgotten and now couldn't be escaped. Inside, the ballroom glowed with chandeliers. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Gold-gilded walls and mirrored ceilings surrounded guests dressed in couture from the world's most coveted designers. Mia moved through the crowd like royalty. She shook hands with ambassadors, exchanged laughs with CEOs. Even Anna Wintour gave her a nod of approval. But she was waiting for one person, and he was about to arrive. Jason Carter. He had managed to weasel his way into the gala by pitching his failing startup to a minor tech investor who happened to be on the guest list. His company had recently taken a hit: bad press, unstable funding, missed deadlines. But tonight, he was determined to fix it all. He wore a borrowed tux and a forced smile, holding Chelsea's hand a little too tightly. The moment they stepped into the ballroom, Jason felt it. Eyes, everywhere. People were whispering, not about him, about her. Chelsea leaned in. "That's her, isn't it?" Jason followed her gaze, and there Mia stood. Under the chandelier, with Luca beside her, surrounded by designers and dignitaries. She looked like a queen in exile returning to reclaim her empire, and everyone welcomed her like they had been waiting all along. Jason swallowed hard. She hadn't just moved on, she had elevated. Mia spotted him across the room and didn't flinch. She gave a small nod to Luca and walked alone through the center of the crowd. Each step echoed. Guests turned, parted, whispered. By the time she reached Jason, the air was thick with anticipation. "Mia," he said, voice unsure, trying to smile. "Jason," she replied, calm, cold, controlled. Chelsea gave a small, awkward wave. "Hi, I'm not here for her." Mia cut in gently, eyes never leaving Jason's. "This is between you and me." Jason chuckled nervously. "You look incredible. I didn't even know." "Of course you didn't," she said. "You never asked." He shifted. "Look, I was young. Stupid. I didn't mean half the things I said." "You meant every word," Mia said. "You laughed at me. You called me simple. You dismissed me in public. You told strangers I didn't fit into your world." Jason looked around, realizing that her world now dwarfed anything he'd ever dreamed of. "I didn't know who you were," he said. "No," she replied. "You didn't know who you were. That's the difference." People nearby were pretending not to listen, but they were. Jason took a step closer. Can we just talk? Somewhere quiet? No, Mia said, voice clear. You had years to talk. You chose silence. Now it's my turn. She leaned in slightly, just enough for only him to hear. Thank you. He blinked. What? Thank you for underestimating me, she said. Thank you for teaching me the difference between love and control, between kindness and convenience. Thank you for showing me what I never want again. Jason stood frozen. Chelsea awkwardly grabbed his arm. We should go. He didn't move. As Mia turned to walk away, she stopped and looked back one last time. Oh, and Jason? Yeah? She smiled softly. Next time you call a woman too simple for luxury, make sure she doesn't own the runway you're standing on. With that, she walked away. The room exploded, not in applause, but in energy. People stared in awe. Conversations resumed in whispers. Phones buzzed with silent texts. Jason stood there, humiliated, powerless, forgotten. And Mia? She returned to Luca's side, raised her champagne glass and toasted silently. Not to revenge, to liberation. Because power doesn't always scream. Sometimes it walks in heels, commands a room, and leaves the past gasping for air. The morning after the Belvoir Gala, Paris woke up differently, not because of a scandal. Not because of some celebrity meltdown, but because of a woman. A woman who redefined what it meant to be underestimated, and used that doubt as fuel to ignite something unstoppable. Mia stood barefoot on the balcony of her suite, the silk robe slipping over her shoulders as the sunrise painted the Seine in gold. The city buzzed below, waking up slowly. Horns, birds, footsteps, the soft clink of coffee cups in corner cafes. She sipped tea, the same way she always had. Simple. Still her. But she wasn't the same woman who cried in silence in a dim Brooklyn apartment. She wasn't the girl who let her voice be silenced to keep someone else comfortable. She wasn't the version of herself designed to fit into a man's idea of enough. She was full, unapologetic, and fully in control of her story. The tabloids were relentless that morning. Mia Delacroix ends Fashion Week with royal-level mic drop. From exile to empire, the heiress who outsmarted the industry. He called her too simple. She called the shots. Photos flooded the internet. Her gown, her stare, the moment she left Jason speechless in front of the world's elite. But none of that was the real triumph. The real story wasn't about Jason, or Luca, or even Paris. The real story was what happens when a woman stops apologizing for being soft, or kind, or quiet, and starts recognizing that her softness is her strength. Later that afternoon, she sat down for an interview with an international fashion publication. The reporter asked, "What's the biggest lesson you've learned from all of this?" Mia thought for a moment, then said, that we are not required to stay small to be loved. That shrinking ourselves to fit into someone's fragile ego isn't noble, it's destructive. And that luxury isn't about money or labels, it's about knowing your worth. The quote went viral. Women across the world shared it. From Manhattan to Mumbai, London to Lagos, women reposted her words on stories, tagged their friends, added their own photos with captions like, "Here's to not shrinking anymore. Soft doesn't mean weak. Not simple, just too powerful for small men." Mia didn't cry when she saw the wave of support. She smiled, because the truth is, this wasn't just about her anymore. Her story had become something bigger. A permission slip for every woman who had ever stayed silent in rooms that mocked her voice, who had ever been told she was too plain, too soft, too simple. This was for the girl who gave too much and got too little in return, for the woman who dimmed her light to make her partner shine, for the mother who put herself last for years and forgot what it felt like to dream, for the artist who hid her paintings in a closet because someone once told her they were nice but not good enough. For every version of womanhood that had been dismissed, Mia became a mirror, and in that mirror, millions saw themselves, not as broken, but as blooming. 1 week after the gala, she launched the Delacroix Women Initiative, a global mentorship and micro-grant program for women in fashion, tech, and the arts. She partnered with Luca's company to fund scholarships for girls from underrepresented communities. And she didn't stop there. She went on stage at a TED-style event in London, no script, no teleprompter, just her, and said, "I spent too long believing I had to be small to be loved, that men would only stay if I kept quiet, dressed soft, and didn't take up too much space. But here's what they don't tell you. The right people won't ask you to shrink. They'll make room for you to rise." Standing ovation. Tears in the audience. One woman sobbed into her hands. A 17-year-old girl in the front row whispered, "That's me." And it was. It was all of us. Because Mia's journey wasn't just about fashion or revenge. It was about remembering that softness is not weakness, that quiet is not invisibility, that grace is not surrender, that your worth isn't up for negotiation. She left that stage not as a symbol, not as a trend, but as a testament. To every woman reading this, watching this, feeling this, you don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to dazzle to be seen. You don't have to shrink to be loved. You are not too simple for anything. You are enough, right now, exactly as you are. And when you finally rise, don't whisper. Walk in like you own the room, because you do. So the story has ended, our wonderful friends. Are you still here with us now? If you're really still here, then maybe something in Mia's journey spoke to a piece of your heart. Maybe it reminded you of your own silence, your own moments of shrinking to make someone else feel tall. And maybe, just maybe, it reminded you that your softness, your kindness, your dreams, they are not weaknesses. They are your quiet strength. You see, Mia's transformation wasn't just about couture gowns or glittering galas. It was about remembering who she was before the world told her to be smaller. Her story teaches us that no one has the right to define your worth, especially not someone who calls you too simple while standing in the shadow of your strength. And maybe, just maybe, that's the reminder we all need. You do not need permission to be powerful. There's a quote from Heterodoxism that says, "Healing begins the moment you stop asking others to validate your truth and start honoring it yourself." That's what Mia did. And maybe now, it's your turn. If you're someone who's been called too plain, too soft, too quiet, too much, or not enough, this is your call. Not just to rise, but to reclaim. Reclaim your voice, your dreams, your self-worth. You are not too simple for anything. You are not behind. You are not invisible. You are blooming. So if you've been moved, if this story stirred something in you, I invite you, no, I ask you, to like this video, to share it with someone who needs to hear it, and to subscribe to this channel where we tell stories that heal and empower. Because the next story, it could be yours. And when you rise, make sure they hear your heels echo down the marble floor. You're not just walking into the room, you own it. So the story has ended, dear friends. And if you're still here, still watching or listening at this point, then maybe something inside this story spoke to you in a way that words often can't explain. Maybe it wasn't just Evelyn's journey. It was yours too. Because at the heart of it, this story isn't just about betrayal or glamour or revenge. It's about choosing yourself in the silence. About healing not for show, but for soul. About realizing that when the world counts you out, your next move can be the loudest whisper of all. I'm still here, and I'm becoming. There's something sacred about watching someone fall apart, and not just survive, but come back stronger, softer, and wiser. That's what Evelyn did. And maybe that's what you're doing too. There's a beautiful quote from Heterodox Wisdom that says, "Do not be ashamed of how long it took you to heal. You are still healing, and that too is holy." So maybe you're not where you want to be yet. Maybe you're still holding back tears in private. Maybe your strength doesn't look glamorous. It just looks like waking up again, trying again, breathing through the pain. But hear this, your healing is enough. Your journey is real. And just like Evelyn, you're not waiting to be chosen anymore. You are already becoming the woman or the man you were always meant to be. If this story stirred something in you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Not just for the content, but to remind someone else who might need to hear this today. You are not broken. You are rising. And if you're still here, thank you. You matter more than you know.